Okay. Well, it says we're on Facebook Live, and thank you for to the Black Caucus Legislative Caucus members of Kansas who have joined us. And that's Senator Oletha Fauske-Dole, Senator David Haley, and Representative Jim Carr. I'm sorry, Ford Carr. Excuse me, Representative Ford Carr. My name is Mary Dean, and I am the host of Seasoned Women. We're a podcast that's raw, real, and uncut, and we try to make it make sense. I'm just saying. So I'd like to welcome the Kansas Legislative Black Caucus members who came to be a part of this forum. So I'll let James introduce himself, and then we'll let the members introduce themselves as well.
Okay, I'm James Barfield, host of the Kansas most popular podcast, Your Urban Connection. And I, again, would like to welcome those of you who have joined us from the Kansas African American Legislative Caucus, and I hope that others will be joining us soon. And I just want to take a minute to say, the reason we're doing this is because basically people across the state often ask us questions, what is happening with our Black Caucus? And rather than us trying to impose our opinions on what's happening, we thought it would be a good idea to bring you guys together and let you speak for yourself and tell your constituents across the state basically what is happening in your area of the state and statewide. So we're very happy to have the three of you here. And like I said, I hope that we'll have others join us because we have a lot of issues that are very important to African Americans throughout the state. And we would like to hear from everybody about how you feel about these issues and find out what issues that you have in store and what we can expect from you in 2024.
Can I ask, I'd like to ask a question. How many members are in the Kansas Legislative Black Caucus? Anyone?
I think there are 9. Is it 9?
Yeah, I think it's 8 or 9. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what I have on my list. It's 9 of them. Okay, it's 2 of you, 2 senators, and 7 representatives. Correct? Okay. All right. Well, so would you be kind enough to introduce yourself?
And Mary, I'm sorry, I have a backup question to that. How many of those 9 are Democrats?
All but 1.
Okay, so 8.
Yes.
Okay. Now, let me just ask this, Mary, can we confirm that all 9 members were invited to this meeting?
Absolutely. They were sent out an invite last week, and I sent out a reminder again Monday, and I also follow up a couple of yesterday.
Okay.
When I sent out the link.
Did any of them contact you to say that they would not be available?
No one yet.
Okay. Just want to ask.
So let me interject for just a minute. If I'm not mistaken, John Alcala is also a member of this caucus, and he wasn't invited. I sent him an email earlier today. I forwarded that email to him. Of course, you know, being the freshman here, I'm not sure if technically, you know, he's a member, but he certainly represents an extremely large population of African American constituents. So I wanted to be sure that he had this invitation as well. However, with the difficulty that I had getting into the Zoom, he may have had that same level of difficulty, but I did reach out to him, and I didn't notice that his name was on the list.
Representative Ford, sorry about that. For any of you that had difficulties trying to get in, I really apologize. I don't know what happened, but the reason why he didn't receive an invite is because his name was not part of the list of the members who belong to the Kansas Black Legislative Caucus. So that's the only reason why I didn't send him an invite. But if if you send him one and forward it to him, thank you very much for that. All right, can you members introduce yourself?
I am Senator Olitha Faust-Godeau. I represent the 29th District in the Kansas Senate. And that area is here in Wichita, Kansas. And those boundaries, I go 37th Street North. I go to Kellogg South. I go east to Woodlawn. And then I cover all of downtown Wichita and west over to the river, to Riverside area. But I live in the heart of the 29th District. I'm over here off of 13th and Edgemore, Parkwood area.
Thank you, Senator.
I guess I'll follow up.
I'll take the liberty of following Senator Faust-Godeau. Good afternoon. I'm David Haley, and I represent Kansas City, Kansas, Wyandotte County in the state senate. This is, and I have the core of the city. I represent what's been described as the inner city, probably one of the most densely populated inner city districts in the state. This is my going on my 30th year, 6 years in the House, 24 in the Senate. And I serve on the judiciary committees and local government and elections and other interim joint committees as well. I want to thank both of you, really, Ms. Dean, Mr. Barfield, especially, and your constituencies for having this. I hope that it will be the start. In my many years, we don't have many interim discussions among the Black Legislative Caucus to discuss these issues. At one point in time, we had the African American Affairs Commission and a foundation that would go around the state to different parts of especially our universities, and we had little forums to discuss it. But second only to that, which has been defunct for a decade, I do want to thank you again for the work that it takes to put this together, and hope that it's perhaps the first time of what will be many times that or opportunities that we have.
Thank you, Senator Haley.
And I am Ford Carr, state representative of the 84th District, that's in Wichita. My boundaries are roughly, my northern boundary is 21st Street. My southernmost boundary would be just slightly past Kellogg, with a western boundary of Washington and an eastern boundary of Oliver Street.
Okay, thank you, Representative Ford. Much appreciation for that. I like to,
Representative Carr.
yeah, didn't I say Ford Carr,
Yeah.
or did I say just Ford?
You said Ford.
Yeah, it's okay. I answer to both.
Well,
Miss Mary Dean,
Yeah.
he's always saying, just remember Ford, the Ford car.
Right, right. And I sure don't want to disrespect your title. I really don't. Based on what's on the agenda that was on the flyer that was sent out, I'd like to start off with a few of those questions. I know that you are in Topeka 3 months out of the year, and the other 9 months, you're not. So I like to ask, some questions about the 3 months of the year that you're in session. And first off, I'd like to give accolades to the Wichita City Council for passing a city ordinance for the Crown Act when they did that on Tuesday. I know that St. Louis, well, Kansas City, Missouri, they passed one in 2020, and St. Louis passed one in 2021. That's the city. So I know that state of Missouri has a SB 424 that's still sitting up in there. They haven't done anything with that, unfortunately. And so I'd like to know, is there going to be any plans for the Black Caucus to introduce a bill and maybe partner with a Republican ally to co-sponsor a Crown Act for the state of Kansas?
Mary Dean, I'll take that question. So I've introduced the bill 3 years in a row. I've had a hearing each year. And unfortunately, the bill's not moved out of committee. I do have a commitment from the chairman, Senator Mike Thompson, the chairman of the Senate Federal and State Affairs Committee, that he will hold a hearing in the 2024 session. So I will just reintroduce the legislation, and I am hopeful that it will pass this session, especially from what you just stated of it passing in local municipalities. And so we are in a legislature that they always say, what are other states doing? What are other counties doing? So I believe it will help, but I will still need help from others to testify in favor of the bill. And what COVID has done for us is that the Kansas legislature is now allowing virtual testimony in just about every committee hearing. So if you can't make it that 2 hours from Wichita to Topeka, or that hour and a half from Kansas City or surrounding areas, you can submit written testimony or testify virtually.
So what is that bill number, Senator?
Well, it does not have every year you introduce a bill, it gets a new bill number, and that won't take place until after we reconvene on January 8th, I believe, and of 2024. And Senator Haley or Representative Forcar, is that correct? To your knowledge, January 8th?
It's the second Monday of January. I don't have the date in front of me. I don't know the exact date,
Yeah.
but it is by Constitution the second Monday.
And so we will possibly tweak the bill, but we'll use the same shell of the previous Crown Act legislation, but it will be given a new number. And so that won't happen until after the new year. I'll let you know.
Okay, thank you, Senator. James, I know you would like to probably talk about the Kansas African American Affairs Committee.
I would, but first of all, let me, Mary, I think we would be wise to establish a little protocol here, not only for us, but for any viewers that might want to call in and have questions. If we would request who the question is addressed to, either individually or as a group. So basically, I want to talk about the Kansas African American Affairs, but first of all, my first priority is I want to talk to all of you all about the Stand Your Ground law. Now, here in Wichita, we've had several police officers who's been let off because of our district attorney uses as a tool the Stand Your Ground Act to state that because of that Stand Your Ground Act, it automatically gives qualified immunity to police officers in the shooting of our young Black men and women. So basically, my question to all of you all is this, and I'll let Senator Haley go first on this. Because of the fact that many of the original legislators that were responsible for passing the Stand Your Ground law have stated publicly that that was never the intention of the Stand Your Ground law, was to protect and give qualified immunity to police officers. So with that in mind, can you all tell me why this has not been addressed by the Black Caucus?
Well, thank you, Mr. Barfield, and I appreciate that because I was one of those legislators who, from the inception, supported the Stand Your Ground law. And it has been, in my interpretation, and that of many others who did support it originally, it has been perverted. It's been misused on several occasions, not just in Wichita, as you allege, but throughout the state, to provide a qualified immunity or a shelter to errant actions by law enforcement. Very simply this, and I want it to be plain, stand your ground means that one is in a position to defend oneself from an action being taken against them and to use deadly force. The question is the one who is defending themselves, as is so often the case with law enforcement, the aggressor in that particular case? In other words, if you are the one who perpetrates the initial aggression against someone who then is attempting to defend themselves, and then deadly force is used to retaliate to that response, to that self-defense, is that the intention of what stand your ground means? And the answer is no. It was never intended. It was not billed that way. In fact, law enforcement and the use by law enforcement during the course of the discussion for what would become the Stand Your Ground law was never brought up by case example. Normally, what we're talking about and what we look to is, let's take a homeowner or someone who is in their own, the castle doctrine, if you will, that a person's home is their castle. And that if in fact they're in their castle or they're on their home space and are attacked in their home space, someone's breaking in, that all force to reply, to respond, to defend, to stand their ground on their castle could be utilized. That's how it was sold. That's how it was billed. That's what I support and frankly still support. You never had any discussion of law enforcement or someone else being the aggressor, then being able to turn around and use more deadly force after having been the initial aggressor against someone who would then become the victim because of self-defense. To your next point, didn't mean to go on and on because it makes me a little angry because I was the ranking member of the Judiciary Committee, Senate Judiciary, when the bill came through. And I'd like to come back. We do have the opportunity, as we have now, as we're having this discussion, to go back and look at the minutes from how it came through the Senate and the House Judiciary Committees and the discussions that were had and the testimony from the conferees that brought it, to show that what I'm saying is true. We didn't talk about law enforcement's ability to utilize this doctrine. To your second question, or to the second point that you brought up, and I'll yield. We have not had a qualified response to qualified immunity. Some heinous cases that have come out, and frankly, our district attorney here in Wyandotte County, Mark Dupree, has already not brought charges on someone who was attempting to use or is in the process of bringing that to law enforcement that have attempted to use it. Our district attorney here, Mr. Dupree, is not letting law enforcement use Stand Your Ground as a defense to egregious actions. But no, the Black Legislative Caucus has not and should certainly be looking at how we curb it or amend the bill to be what it was originally supposed to be. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go on and on, but I'm pretty passionate about this particular topic because it's the okie doke that has had completely unintended consequences in its utilization of the law.
Mr. Barfield, Senator Fausto here. I actually introduced a bill on Stand Your Ground law right after Cedric Lofton's death. Unfortunately, I didn't get a hearing. And currently in the Joint Committee on Corrections and Juvenile Justice Oversight Committee, I have been working with Moms Against Gun Violence, as well as Everytown. It's like a hub of against gun violence. And just recently, October 4th, we actually addressed the stand your ground law. We actually heard from the Sedgwick County manager, came to the Capitol last session and made a presentation. Remember, after Cedric Lofton's death, that task force got together at the city and they came up with 57 recommendations. And some of those recommendations in there were to create the crisis, instead of taking a person with a mental issue, a youth, instead of taking them to jail, they will now go to a crisis center. We also took one of the recommendations, which was the Representative Gail Finney's bill, and made it into law to address those in foster care. So I have been actively addressing the issue currently, just as current as October 4th. And so not working directly with the Black Caucus members, but I did introduce the bill, but we didn't get a hearing. And that's where we need all of the organizations and community groups in Wichita to, we have to work together. And when a bill is introduced, we need a lobbyist up there to daily advocate for a hearing for legislation that's important to us.
Well, let me have a little follow-up answer here. First of all, you said that you were not able to get a hearing on it. And I would suggest to you, and I'm not trying to tell you how you do your job, but if I remember correctly, Representative Steve Owens of the McPherson was one of the loudest voices on this to state that the legislature never intended for that law to be used in the manner in which it is being used, and it was last used just 2 weeks ago here in Wichita. So I would suggest to you that maybe you need to reach across the aisle to somebody like Representative Owens, who I understand is now running for Senate. But in either case, reach across the aisle to somebody like him or one of the other legislators who was there to get them, if they're admitting that this was not the intent, then come on, let's get on board with my bill, my proposed bill here, and let's make some changes, let's make some amendments to this bill.
Mr. James Barfield, the Joint Committee just this past October 4th, Representative Stephen Owens is the chair of that committee. And he says that that wasn't our intent. However, he is the chairman and he is the one that will say yay or nay to holding the bill. So I suggest you give him a call.
And I want to do a follow-up on Cedric Lofton, Senator. Anybody can answer this question. Is it possible for the Black Caucus to come together to introduce a bill in the name of Cedric Lofton? We're always, putting out his name out there, and every time you turn around, but to introduce a bill on behalf of Cedric Lofton and other foster children that have been in the system and got, lost their lives. Anybody can answer that one.
Address it to a specific individual, or if you want to say all of them, so that everybody doesn't speak at the same time.
Well, I've seen these kind of forums before, and they said anybody can answer. So I'm just saying anybody, has an opportunity to answer that question.
So I can give you the short answer. The short answer is certainly we can introduce it. However, what we run into is exactly what Senator Faust drew reference to earlier, is that unfortunately at this time, neither any member of the African American Caucus, or for that matter, the Democratic Party, certainly not in the House, we're not in a position to force anyone to provide a hearing for that. And as Mr. Barfield referred or drew reference to Representative Owens, I believe that Senator Faust was being kind in her response uh, when she stated that you might want to reach out to him. I think sometimes we have a misunderstanding as to who is and who is not necessarily on the right side. And I would consider us as being on the right side. We don't have that support from the other side of the aisle, that side from which we are supposed to reach out to. And you know, again, I'm certainly the freshman here and have not been around as long as my colleagues. You know, however, it doesn't take a genius to see how difficult sometimes that can be. I'm not saying impossible, but it's certainly not. It's certainly not the ease of just reaching across the aisle, as was mentioned, and that's what we run into more times than not. And back to the original question, Mary, yeah, we can certainly introduce a bill. You know, we can work with the revisers, and we can put anything into the bill that we want, and we can honorarily name that the Cedric Lofton bill or Cedric Lofton Bill of Rights or whatever we want to do based on the contents of the bill. However, we still run up against, you know, our greatest challenge is getting, you know, the majority rules in this, and we need to try to convince that majority to see the importance of the bill as we see it, to get a hearing and potentially move it forward.
Representative Ford Carr, let me, would it would it help if people came up there and testified in front of the committee that you know, does these kind of things? Would that help?
Mary Dean, I would certainly, yeah, I would certainly encourage that. In fact, I would say that that would increase the chances greatly. And again, let me echo the previous comments of my colleague, Senator Faust Goudeau. We don't have the luxury of anyone who is in the State House on a regular basis advocating for anything that is related to the better interest of African Americans. A lobbyist is something that would do wonders for us, in my opinion. And certainly, if we got our constituents, the general populace, you know, of not just Wichita but the entire state, if we could get people to show up and be willing to testify, and sometimes it's not even testifying, just be there, right? Just show up, just just sit outside someone's front door, right? They'll notice you. You know, they may walk past you the first time, but they'll notice you if you're there long enough. And that's the problem. We simply aren't being noticed, and it's difficult. It's difficult for any of us to create a megaphone when we're trying to talk to people in another room and they've closed the door.
So what you're saying is that our constituents should be up there to make some folks uncomfortable.
That's what we need. That's definitely what we need. You know, we're in this fight, and it is a fight, and we're outnumbered. We have to come like, like the 300, because we are so outnumbered. You know, so we have to come with that kind of resilience in order to get anything done, and certainly all of the as many people as we can get to be actively engaged and show up. That's going to hurt our cause. You know, and I'm not throwing any colleague under the bus that doesn't need to be thrown under the bus, but I saw that same Representative Owens entertain those young people from Progeny, for several days, and they received a standing ovation as the bill that they came to present, and in fact there were two, as they passed out of committee, and it was a great day, you know. However, those bills never saw the House floor, and none of us that are wearing a Democratic jacket control that, you know. And Representative Owens certainly had the position and the power to see to it that it made it, you know, what we call in the State House above the line, so that the entire body can have an opportunity to vote on that. It never made it above the line, and we don't have the power to get it there, but they do. So certainly, you know, and like I said, I'm not throwing him under the bus, but you know, if you didn't crawl under it, I wouldn't roll it over you. So certainly, you know, that would be a place to start. You know, they all want to stand in these positions of power and talk big talk, but when the rubber meets the road, you know, nobody's willing to get behind the driver's seat and put their foot on the gas.
And if I might add, the chairman has the power to request that any bill that comes out of his or her committee get above the line for the debate on the floor of the full body.
Let me say this. First of all, I want to say a statement was made in the opening when you all were identifying yourselves. A statement was made that you were in Topeka for 90 days, and that's when the legislature's in session. But I want to state that for 12 months of the year, you are a representative of your particular districts. Now, so that brings me to the Kansas African American Affairs Commission. And I want to address this initially to Senator Haley, because Senator, you made two comments. Number one, you said you have been in the House or Senate for 30 years. The Kansas African American Affairs Commission was signed into law in 1997 by former Republican Governor Bill Graves. And I want to ask you, sir, the second comment that you made was that they basically have been inactive, you might say, for about a decade. I did a podcast here less than 30 days ago, I believe, where I said the results of an audit that was conducted by the Kansas Legislative Audit Committee basically left anyone that read that result under the impression that this group was totally dysfunctional. Now, that means that African Americans throughout the state, no matter whether or not that's Wyandotte, whether that's Topeka, Wichita, Manhattan, Garden City, Coffeyville, wherever, the African American population in those cities are not receiving a single benefit from the tax dollars that they're providing to fund the Kansas African American Affairs Commission. That means none of your constituents are receiving any benefits. Are you all to tell me that you cannot make a difference with this Democratic governor who's violated Statute 74-9904, which strictly says that when there's an opening in that position, it is to be advertised, which it was not. The commissioners are supposed to gather interested parties' resumes, and the commissioners are supposed to conduct interviews, and the commissioners are supposed to, as a result of those interviews, determine 2 or 3 people that will be best suited to run that organization, and the governor took that completely away from them. Senator Haley, is that what you were approving and authorizing when Governor Graves signed this bill into law?
I'd have to go back, Mr. Barfield. As you know, that was 25 or so years ago. I was an early advocate for the African American Affairs Commission, and we're keeping it separate, by the way, at one point in time, during the course of the legislation, not getting into the nuts and bolts as you are now for how the procedures will go by its membership. It was the desire of that administration, the Graves administration, to have a general commission comprised of African American, Hispanic, and there was a third, Native American. It would be one commission, not an individual commission. And I never will forget my comment to Governor Graves and to the Republican leadership is, what will you call the commission? What will you call it? The You People Commission? Would that be better for you? Just call it the You People Commission. I mean, in other words, because we wanted our autonomy. I wanted our autonomy. So from there, how they were implemented or how they came together, because as you know, we do have an independent one. And as come to light, thanks in part to your advocacy, we are wanting to know how the utilization of whatever funding is available and leadership that is there goes to each of the commissions. I'm concerned about what different appropriations there may be or personnel there may be to the different individual commissions, not just the African American Affairs, but the Hispanic, I don't know the exact acronym for it, but the Hispanic Commission or what have you. So to get to your, I don't know how the membership is named, how the appointments are named. I can go back and study it, but you're better versed on the nuts and bolts of it right now. I am concerned, let me just close right now by saying, I am concerned that we do something beyond symbolism, that we implement as we're talking about now, following, tracking, introducing through or with the support of the African American Affairs Commission, those issues that are relevant to not only African Americans in Kansas, but even elsewhere as well. I'm on the National Black Caucus for State Legislators, and we try to look at what's good for the global whole of it all. There may be some issues that go beyond Black Kansas that we would embrace too, and that commission would, and that we bring our support there. I don't know where that's been. Used to be, I remember previously, it wasn't Mildred, maybe it was Mildred. It was some previous director who would bring a testimony. Not Dempsey Swope, I don't recall.
Oh, Danielle.
Danielle, and they would bring, there would be a statement, like for the Crown Act, for example, from the African American Affairs Commission, independent of what the Black Legislative Caucus would do. And I don't recall that being done in recent years for the advocacy for those areas of issue, those areas and those issues that we want to embrace.
Well, let me follow this up by saying one thing, Senator. I am in touch right now on a daily basis or weekly basis with about 4 or 5 other African American Affairs Commissions. Every Friday, if not Friday, on Monday, I get weekly reports from all of them. And I get annual reports from all of them. For the last 15 years, there has not been a single annual report from Kansas African American Affairs Commission. Don't take my word for it. Ask them if they can produce one. Now, the other African American Affairs Commissions are mandated by statute to provide to the legislature, to the governor, and to any interested constituents copies of an annual report which clearly lays out their activities for the previous year, what their accomplishments were, and what their objectives were. Why is it that we cannot have that amendment made? Ford Carr just stated that all we have to do is get with the revisor's office, okay, and design an amendment and get that amendment put in place so that the taxpayers of state of Kansas get some kind of recognition from this group as to how their money is being spent and what the benefits are being provided.
I have personally would have no problem looking at that. I mean, I would want to see what the, if it's about an annual report and it's in an annual report that has not been given, that has not been rendered, I don't know if we need to change the legislation to do that. I'm always a little concerned about opening up statutes and directives that we have, because it oftentimes is an opportunity for, I'll just say this, some mischief from, those who are opposed to it in the first place. I mean, I want to make sure we absolutely need to open up the legislation again. I honestly do. Or if we can just find some other means to enforce what the law is, or what the authority was under which it was formed, before we try and rewrite the entirety of in this case, the commission itself.
So Senator Haley, are you talking
Yes.
about just doing a in-house policy change?
That could be done, but there might be something that calls for that already. I mean, apparently from what I'm hearing from Mr. Barfield, that might say that that's something that should be done already. It might be already in the enabling legislation that there is to be an annual report. It might be in the enabling legislation that appointments should be made in the manner in which they should, that have not been followed. So I wish I were better familiar with the enacting, which happened a good while back. I don't fully recall, but I'm willing to certainly trust the insight of Mr. Barfield that these are two things that should be done: an annual report as well as appointments that should have been made in a certain way. But I just don't know right off the top of my head.
Let me say this one thing, and I'll leave this alone, Senator. It all evolves, what I'm asking for evolves around one word: transparency.
Mhm.
The taxpayers are entitled to transparency for their tax dollars. That's all I'm saying.
Mhm.
And also as a
Agree.
follow-up on that, on the Kansas African American Affairs Commission, aren't they, per their charter, supposed to go around to the 105 counties in the state of Kansas to hold town hall meetings or listening sessions to see what issues are impacting Black people in those counties, and bring it back and report back to the legislators, governor?
Well, I don't know.
They report back to.
I don't know.
If they're doing it, that's what I'm saying.
I don't know, Ms. Dean, how relevant that would be personally, for them to go to all 105 counties. Frankly, I'd rather that if the time was spent and the expense were put in, that they would go to areas where the bulk of or significant numbers of Black folk are, unless we have an anomaly. And I'll give you an example of what you're saying. In Meade County, which has very low Black population out there in Southwest Kansas, a disproportionate number, it has been found, of Black and brown folk were being pulled over and held for marijuana charges, primarily for marijuana that has been purchased out of state, and they're coming through legally. It was found that, yes, that does disaffect Black people in Kansas, even though there are very few Black and brown people in Meade County. So I'm not suggesting that we don't go, that we may not need to go to all 105 counties because they're just because of population, but we have to identify those areas where Black and brown people are underrepresented. And it may not be the whole of the state, because in some parts of the state, there are no Black and brown people in Kansas.
Well,
Okay.
I think the answer to that is, let's say you take Manhattan, Junction City, and Fort Riley. Well, you don't have to go to each one of those, but the proximity of those three, you can combine those three and hold your town hall meetings in one county and draw from those other two.
You're on mute, Senator.
Oh, thank you. That was good. Yeah, I'm at 6%, and I got to go find I got to go plug into my charger and say that was what we did. Exactly what you said. We met back in the day at different colleges. I remember we met out there at what's that? The one out there in Fort Hays College.
Fort
That
Hays
was a
State.
wonderful day. Yeah, Fort Hays State, and then we met at K-State. I think we met at Wichita State.
We did. We did.
And then at KU, and then there's something. I mean, so it was good, and it was regional, primarily regional, to have the town. I mean, back when the foundation was in place, the Kansas African Affairs. It wasn't the African American Affairs Commission. It was a foundation we had. We used to raise money and everything. It was a good organization. It was really good because the lobbyists would help fund that. It was a foundation, that we had. But anyway, yeah, we could do that. I mean, I'd like to see that revived.
Senator Olitha Fausto, this question is for you. All the time I'm getting all kind of phone calls from grandparents and parents about their children in foster care. At one time, I was in connection with Brooke. What is Brooke's last? What is her first? I can't think of Brooke's last name, but anyway, she's with the Child Advocacy Agency under the governor. And I was wondering, is that agency still in place? And what is the oversight committee that you're on with Senator Richard Hildebrand? What have y'all found out when it comes to repeated issues involving children that's in the foster care system? Brooke Towns, that's her.
I'm hearing something. Thank you, Mary Dean, for that question. And first, I want to say, before I forget and before we get off here, today is Representative Ford Carr's birthday.
Oh, happy birthday, Representative Carr.
Happy
Thank you.
birthday.
Thank you. And let me say, I'm actually at my birthday dinner, but I took time out to peel away for this meeting. But at 7 o'clock, I'm going to have to exit. So at 7 o'clock, I will be exiting the this meeting. But I didn't want to miss it, and I wanted to give it. I wanted to give it the time that it was due, but fortunately, this was the day that God chose to bring me on this earth, and so I've got my family here waiting. So,
before you go, Representative Carr, I'd like to let you know that this meeting is being recorded. I'm gonna upload it, and I will send every one of you a copy of the recording, and it's also going to be uploaded to YouTube and my Twitter page and shared on all my pages. So I just want to let you know that you won't miss anything, because then you'll get it. Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much, and thank everybody for the happy birthday wishes.
Happy birthday, Representative. Happy birthday, Ford Carr.
It's not every day you turn 21.
Hello.
Right.
But in your case, it seems to be every year.
Have fun.
All right. All right. Thank you.
And Mary Dean, thank you for the question. I want to clarify, though, Senator Hildebrand, he is no longer in the legislature. And that committee that he was on, that was a one-time special committee. And so the chairwoman of the Child Welfare Committee, the Joint Child Welfare Committee, that is Senator Beverly Gossage. And we just met in Topeka last week, as a matter of fact, for a couple of days. And we had the Secretary of DCF there. We talked about family first. So we've received federal funding to implement family first to address some of the long-standing issues of children within the foster care system, children in the child in need of care system. And so some of the recommendations we just made on October 3rd or 4th was to help the entire family, that there will be hearings now before you remove children from homes. There will be certain questions that you ask before children are removed. We recommended that you try to help the entire family first before you remove children. Also, there is a new child advocate center that the governor implemented, whereas there's an 800 number where you can call that number, and all they do is deal with the issues that you and I have heard about for years. I will get you that phone number so that you can include it to your online information. Also, recently, as I said, we were there October 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. A few individuals who have had long-standing issues, they came to Topeka, and I was able to get them to speak in front of the committee, and the Secretary Laura Howard, the chairwoman, they've talked to them. They are addressing their issues. But again, every situation is different. And so the recommendations that we have made in this special committee, because the Joint Committee on Child Welfare, it only meets periodically. But the recommendations we've made will be bills that will be introduced in the 2024 session to address some of the long-standing issues that we've had. And so, but yeah, Hildebrand, unfortunately, he's not in the legislature anymore.
Let me say this. I want to chime in here. I have to say this. When you say that, let me first of all say this. Governor Kelly inherited, and these are my words, a dysfunctional DCF. In the 5 years that she's been there, I've not seen very much, if any, progress. Now, let me just tell you this. When you say, as you just said a minute ago, that you got to be very careful about removing these kids from their homes, it's better to err on the side of caution. And if you don't, and if you have to jump through all these hoops and you make it so bureaucratic, you end up with what you just ended up with 2 weeks ago, with a 5-year-old child being killed because of the DCF not addressing 9 complaints from neighbors, from relatives, from friends about the danger that this young 5-year-old was involved with, staying in that home with no running water, no electricity, an abusive, drug-addicted mother, and yet they never, ever reacted to any one of those 9 complaints.
But we've had multiple situations like that, and it's unfortunate that one child is too many to be lost in the system that is dysfunctional. So yeah, especially at our local level. Our local level, I get calls all the time about grandparents and parents not being able to, and they're not considering family first, Senator Faust. They're just not.
Absolutely. That program it's fairly new, and everybody, you could go back and watch that committee online, the Joint Committee on Child Welfare. It was hot and heated of some of the concerns you've shared were brought up. And it's good to have it on paper, but you actually have to implement it. You've got to do it and not just talk about it. So I agree with you 100%. And Mr. Barfield, as a matter of fact, we were, I know Mary said that we're in session for 90 days officially, but I go back and forth all year for special committees whenever situations come up. And we were actually in Topeka when we all heard the news about that 5-year-old that was raped and murdered. And we brought Secretary Howard in immediately and asked the questions of when did the police go? Who was notified? What is your process? And we were dissatisfied with the response of DCF saying they make a phone call, they send a letter, then they go to the door. And so we have recommended that you lay eyeballs on that child, that you some way or another, we've got to change the law to whereas you can't just knock and somebody tell you anything, that you actually have to see that child. This is similar to what happened to Carl Brewer's grandson. You know, so we've, please, if you can, go back and watch the Joint Committee on Child Welfare's most recent committee meeting.
Well, it
And I
doesn't
think
help that.
Senator Haley wants to say something.
Okay.
Well, only that, it came out of that. I mean, there are numerous examples that have been abated at that happens. And I don't know, depending on who you ask, where or how we as a society address this, or state government addresses it as well. As Aletha was just saying, it's an ongoing process as recent as this week. I don't remember the young boy that was found here in Wyandotte County, and getting back to naming a law, as you mentioned, Cedric Lofton, it took so much to name the bill after him. They found this young man who had several incursions, or there'd been several warning signs. They had him in a pig trough, and the little boy who had died. It was just so shocking to the conscience here in Wyandotte County that they did name it, and I can't call his name. I can only remember his name at this point, but they did name it. It was just so egregious that there would have to be, as Aletha, as Senator Vasquez just went over, that law enforcement can't just knock at the door, or the responding entity from DCF can't just knock at the door and take the word of a guardian or parent that everything's all right. They must actually lay eyes and make an independent judgment beyond that. But apparently, warning signs time and time again, as has just been witnessed in Topeka with that 5-year-old. I mean, there's still some problems with the system, and I don't know if we can legislate it away, but something, accountability within an administration. I have a friend who's always saying that the administration at DCF and even the governor needs to bear some responsibility for what's this ongoing problem.
It doesn't
another
do any
thing-
good for the governor to come out 2 weeks after this child is dead and start talking about transparency. That's the problem. You're being reactive instead of proactive. And for her to say, look, the buck stops there. She's the governor. This organization, the DCF, operates under her leadership. And she doesn't know what the hell's going on. She says they don't talk to her, don't tell her nothing. That doesn't play and sit very well with the taxpaying public.
Based on either one of you could answer this question, senators. Based on everything that we've talked about thus far, does the Kansas Black Legislative Caucus members get together and talk about these particular issues that we are discussing tonight, and what the solutions are besides, I know doing a bill and whatever, talking to the governor? Do y'all get together and talk about these?
As a
important
caucus.
issues?
Yes, we do. So in the 2023 legislative session, I called a meeting with the governor. All of the Black legislative lawmakers met with the governor. One of the things we addressed at that time was we brought it to her attention of the water contamination, 29th and Grove here in Wichita. We brought that issue to her attention, and That's how KDHE got involved in the first place. We also meet once a week to talk about legislation that we are supporting together. But unfortunately, we're not all on the same page all of the time. As a matter of fact, Mr. James Barfield, I just, after visiting with you about that audit with the Kansas African American Affairs Commission, I sent the director, Stacy Nell, I sent her an email, and I have requested that the Black Legislative Caucus and the African American Affairs Commissions, that we meet immediately right after our 2024 session starts. So we will be meeting to reconvene and to address these issues that we've talked about here tonight, to put it on our agendas, to speak with a reviser and get a bill named after Cedric Lofton, etc. I also plan to address some of these issues that I'm going to deal with in the upcoming session, the revoked driver's license, maternal mortality. I was contacted by a Black female realtor who has asked me to introduce a bill to help Black veterans. And of course, we'll deal with the Crown Act, Stand Your Ground, and the young lady named Keenan Charles. She has a bill with the violence impact that she wants to be reintroduced. And I think you spoke with her about that, Mr. Barfield. And then, of course, some of the child welfare issues. Mary Dean, those issues we've dealt with a long time. And I have got the data and the charts. It seems like so much happens to Black children in foster care more often than other races. And so, yes, the answer to your question is yes. I plan to, moving forward, make sure that the Black lawmakers meet, and I'll present what we've discussed here tonight.
Aletha, Senator Fausto, I like to say as well that some of these several people that I have advocated for, their issue when they go to family court with a certain judge, Phil Journey, is an issue. I have talked to the chief judge, Jeffrey Goring, about Journey and about the things that he does. And even the chief judge agrees with everything that I said that this man has done and is doing to families that come before him. He feels like he's above the law, that that's his court instead of the people's court, and legislating laws from his bench. So how in the world, when a chief judge tells me that he can't do anything when it comes to Journey, and he has complaints against him up there in Topeka, and how does he get reined in, from the state? Because I know he's elected, I get that, but he is doing a lot of harm to a lot of families that come before him.
Let me say this before some of the other, before you two senators say you have to leave. First thing I want to say to you, Senator Fausto, I appreciate you requesting a meeting with Stacy Nell and the other commissioners, but I would also suggest that you suggest a meeting as a caucus with the governor, because let me tell you what's happened. The governor has disrespected you and each one of you elected African-American representatives. She's disrespected each one of the Black Kansas African-American Affairs commissioners, and she's basically disrespected every African-American in the state of Kansas. And let me tell you how. Because she concluded by violating state statute 74-9904 and going out and making a political appointment with someone that is not qualified on paper. And she's suggesting that she knows more who's better equipped to represent us than the commissioners, than the legislative caucus, and the Black people. That's a slap in the face, and we should not take that sitting down. Now, let me say this finally, before you all get away. I would like for the two of you to talk about your top two issues that you will be addressing and working on during the 2024 legislative session.
Well,
You can go
let me,
first,
thank you, let me thank you about
Senator
that.
Haley.
All right, thank you. And I thank you for asking us to share that. And I certainly am prepared to follow up to ensure that the African American Affairs Commission is working more true to form and true to statute. I mean, we've shared, I think we talked a couple of years ago about this, Mr. Barfield,
Yes,
and I
sir.
said then, and I'll repeat that now. I am, and I appreciate you having me. I'm actually, I'm sorry I have to go. The ABA, the American Bar Association, is in Kansas City for our conference now, and I've got some colleagues that are here. They want to go for barbecue, and I told them I'd be running late, but they went for barbecue here in town, and I said I was looking forward to this forum and wanted to be situated before I joined them there for the opening night. My two are akin to what we're talking about. It's accountability of our law enforcement. I've introduced and will continue. And I know Aletha just touched upon some of the issues that she will be embracing. I certainly, we're quite a tag team. We're the only two, as you know, two Black state senators out of 40. We are 5% of the body. But we're a powerful one with Fals Godot. We got some power. She's our assistant leader, and she does an excellent job in bringing the strength to those issues across the board. I will be supporting those issues that she just outlined, some of them, and then the ones that I've been pushing for a long time are for the deprivation of rights under color of law. I was a former assistant DA here in Wyandotte County. And we've had issues where the police take the rights from people, akin to what we were talking about earlier, an issue earlier, under color of law. We've had some officers who have had egregious things done to citizens. They flash a badge and they get away with quite a bit. We've had some celebrated cases where, as I've done with previous legislation I introduced and had passed with the legislature's insistence on wrongful incarceration compensation. People that are locked up that did not do the crime, that did time, and now will be compensated. But who are these errant law enforcement, and how are they paying for it when they deprive someone of rights under color of law? And then how do we have that subrogated by what might be their income, their pensions? Those are my tag bills that have gone in, that they would be responsible when these huge judgments come back, as there should have been a huge judgment, if you'll pardon me saying, against WPD for what happened in Cedric Lofton's case. But that comes out of the taxpayers. It comes out of Wichita taxpayers, as it does Wyandotte County taxpayers, as we've had to pay. What a bad cop needs to pay for it. They need to subrogate that. And I'll continue to push for that legislation, as I will continue to push also for some economic development issues. We're going to have in the state of Kansas, in my district, at the edge of my district, FIFA is coming, the big soccer, you've heard about that. We're going to have hundreds of thousands of people from around the world. That's no hyperbole. Hundreds of thousands of people from around the world come into Little Wyandotte County. And as soon as they get through watching their soccer games, and what have you, and they look around, it's not like they're in Cedric County or in Wichita, where you all have a bevy of things to do. You get through watching the soccer games, they're gonna say, well, what is there in town to do? There's nothing to do. As I mentioned, the American Bar Association's here, and they go, well, what part of your town should we come to, David? What's there to do? Is there a restaurant? Is there a venue? There's nothing here. And the governor, I'm counting on, and others, in the legislature through our economic development to enhance something known as Quindaro, the Quindaro ruins, the township, Point of Pride, and we've got 24 months to enhance that and to have some point or some place for us to have. I'll be pushing that economic development and that accountability for law enforcement and other issues.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Mr. Barfield, Mary Dean, can I give you the numbers for the Child Advocate Center? There are two telephone numbers, 785-230-2484. And then there is a 785-296-5470. That is a special child advocate center and developed to only take calls and address those calls relating to child in need of care cases / foster care.
Okay, let me, before you leave, Senator Haley, I'm glad you talked about economic development in Wyandotte County. Am I to understand that we have a $2.7 billion surplus in Kansas? That can
Yeah,
be used?
well, 2 billion, yes, indeed. And we didn't talk much about it, but that is an attractive, but we probably haven't had that. And that is something we should give Governor Kelly credit for. The $2 billion in the bank is something that we have not had. I don't know if we've ever had that kind of surplus, but I remember when she was with a Republican senator, and she was a senator, his name was Rattle. They were trying to put the rainy day fund. In other words, what do we have in the savings account? What do we put back beyond that, which is statutorily required? So yeah, we have 2 billion, but they're going to make a run at trying to do what's called the flat tax. They being conservative Republicans, the flat tax, which would have income based on a certain percentage. 5% has been thrown out, which is a regressive tax, which will unduly hurt and take from that 2 billion surplus. I'd like to say a high tide lifts all boats. While we have the money in the bank, let's build up the infrastructure for tourism, for development. And we've heard about some of those big projects, to attract economic development. But yes, we do. You ask a simple question. Yeah, we got 2 billion in the bank, which means they're coming forward to try to get more back in their pockets through tax, through primarily the flat tax.
And is there any way that you, the Black Caucus members can get with the governor and say, hey, we need some economic development here in Wichita to create jobs and housing and everything for the people, Black people that live here, Senator Oletha Fausto-Guddeau? Is there any way we can get some of that money?
Well, absolutely. So when we do our budget every year, we advocate for funding to come to our cities. And so how it works is there's a lump sum that's sent to the city of Wichita and to Sedgwick County. So when that money comes here, then that's when the people need to go to the city and to the county and ask for it. I remember, Mary Dean, you were talking about driving down, I think Douglas, and seeing all the outside cafes on the patios. And it was like, well, can't we do that in the inner cities? And yes, we can, but you've got to ask for that money from the city and from the county. So absolutely. And again, I hope that Senator Haley will bring forward, the Kansas City area, Kansas City, Kansas. I think a lot of people think of it as Kansas City, Missouri, where they've got a bit more. But all of our inner cities need development and economic development. Yes. So I'll let you know when that, because I serve on the local government committee. And so when that funding is being addressed there, I will definitely make sure that I email both of you that information so you can go to the county or city and ask for it.
Okay.
And let me
Mr.
add
Hunter
to that,
still here?
if I could add to that, there was something that called the LABTR, the local ad valorem, and I can't tell you what it is. I only know that it is from the state to offset something, an agreement that was made years ago that the state would forward to the counties. LAVTR, those are the 5 letters, local ad valorem tax rebate, I guess, but it should be significantly taken from that which we have. And I have heard that the governor is going to support that or try to get that through as well.
Senator Haley, I have some information I want to give to you that I don't think you're aware of, and we certainly could appreciate any help that you could give us. Both my co-hosts, Mary Dean and I, sit on a committee called the Billy McCray Naming Committee. We are attempting to find either a local or a state or a Sedgwick County building to carry the name of a guy you served with, and I think you can attest to his accountability on this, Billy McCray. We have
Well,
approached-
honestly, sir, I didn't know. Let me say, I didn't serve with Billy McCray. I've been in a long time, not quite. I did serve with his daughter, McCray Miller,
yeah,
but
okay.
I
Well,
didn't get a chance to. All right. But
Was
I
it
do
your-
know.
was-
The distinguished gentleman. Oh yes, I know of him. Yes, and
Okay.
I think he's certainly worthy. Indeed. I
Okay,
do.
we
Yes,
would
sir.
appreciate any help you could give us on getting the governor's, because as you well know, there's not a state building in the state of Kansas that carries the name of a Black male or a female, for that matter. The
Hmm.
time is now. And there's nobody
Mhm.
that I know of that served his constituents on 3 levels. He served in the Congress, the representative. He served as a senator. He served here as a Sedgwick County commissioner. He spent over 30 years of his life serving the public, Black and white. I think there's nobody that I know of that is more favorable to having a building in the state of Kansas named after him than Billy Q. McCray.
Mhm.
That's already on
Yeah,
board, so
that's a fine
so it's
effort.
already in play in Topeka, but I'm asking for any help you could give us. We'd appreciate it.
Mhm.
Senator-
I certainly. I concur.
Senator
Mhm.
Haley and Senator Elise Fosco, this is my last question before we let you go. James might have one after me, but talking about voter suppression of Black votes in the state of Kansas. And I know that there was a lawsuit brought by the League of Women Voters, Loud Light, never heard of that organization, but Kansas Appleseed and Topeka Independent Resource Center, challenging 2 voter suppression laws, House Bill 2183 and House Bill 2332. The bill in March of 2022, the plaintiffs voluntarily dismissed their claims against HB 2332, and it was appealed on July the 15th. The plaintiffs appealed to the Kansas Court of Appeals decision, and then in 2023, June 24, 2023, the Kansas Supreme Court agreed to hear the defendant's appeal of the Kansas Court of Appeals decision that allowed the plaintiff's ballot collection and signature verification claims to proceed. Do y'all know about any of that? Those particular bills?
Senator
Well-
David Haley.
Yeah, well, thank you, Senator, and thank you, Ms. Dean. So first, the advocacy groups, Appleseed and Loud Light, have helped in conjunction with others like the ACLU to bring these issues from these onerous laws that have been passed to repeal many of the advancements that we have in Kansas for voting. I'm not exactly sure what the bill that you reference is, but one of those, and certainly Olitha would be able to speak to it because she has been an advocate for ensuring that some of the legislation we have in place, like the ability to have the provisional ballots counted and the boxes, and I'll let her discuss that with you, with the boxes, the voting boxes and where they would be found. And then the days after the polls close for mail-in ballots to still reach. all of these, there have been attempts ongoing, not just by the legislature, but even now by the Attorney General, whose name I will not say, to roll back and to make it less accessible for populations to cast their ballots. Just because she won't blow her own horn, I'll say Oletha has championed having polling places, all polling places, accessible, regardless of the one where you're registered, so that you need not go across town if you're having difficulty getting that on election day to vote at the polling place, which just is really common sense, especially in this time of verification that can be done electronically so simply. I mean, so easily. So I don't know what that bill number is that these advocacy groups or what that pertain to specifically, but we are under assault and we're under attack. And let me close by saying this. On the other side of things, here in Wyandotte County, we had a primary, as the state did for our local elections, and we had 6.5%, even with advanced voting, 6.5% to show up to vote. So I kind of go between one extreme and what can we do? We've made so many opportunities available, but even now that while we have them, we still have under participation. 6.5% of the registered voters of Wyandotte County voted in the primary for the local election in August.
Yeah.
So anyway, I don't know specifically what that bill number is, but glad to have the advocacy.
And Mary,
Your groups. Okay, no, go ahead, Oletha, please.
Thank you, Senator David Haley, Mr. James Barfield, Mary Dean. So Senator David Haley and I both serve on the Elections Committee. And this past session, about 930 bills were introduced. I think about 300 and some were implemented. You mentioned House bills. And so I'm not exactly sure about those House bills. And a lot of times you'll hear in the news what Appleseed is doing or ACLU is doing. But when we're in the mix, in the thick of it, we don't really hear about that until later we get home and read the newspapers kind of after the fact, because we're right in the thick of it. But I will say this, just last week, because all these committees like happen at the same time. I've been in Topeka for the last 2 weeks, and we did have a committee hearing on a special elections committee. And so, as you have probably heard on the news today and yesterday, talking about advanced ballots and mailing in your absentee ballot. Normally, our current law says that you have 3 days. So if you get your ballot mailed back, and Mr. Barfield is showing, so if you get your ballot mailed back and it's postmarked, and you've got 3 days that your ballot will still be counted. Well, in the election hearing the other day, or just an interim committee. So here's what's coming in the 2024 session. They want to do away with that 3-day grace period. They're going to introduce, the majority party, will introduce a bill that election day is election day, that your ballot must be in by that day at 7 o'clock and counted. And they're going to eliminate the 3-day period. So what we are doing is making it harder to vote. They also want to do away with mail voting altogether. So it's a lot coming down the pipeline. These are just proposals. There's no bills that have been put together yet, no language that I've seen yet. But as soon as that comes, I'll let you know, because that's where the fight is going to be. For me, this coming session is you taking away the right, not the right to vote, but they're going to make it harder to vote.
Okay.
And we've got to do everything we can to stop that, but it's coming down the tracks.
Okay, let me wrap this up by saying this to you all. I want you to give a message from me to your colleague, Mr. K.C.O. Hobson. Tell him that his constituents in District 84 would not get mad for 1 second if he started returning telephone calls. And they would not get mad if after 7 years, he would sponsor a bill. We would appreciate that.
And he's District 89.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You're right. 89. Yes. Pass that message on, because all of the constituents that I've talked to in 89 say he refuses to return any phone calls.
There's been a question by one of the people that's viewing this, and they want to know from either one of you senators, what do you have a website where they could keep informed and what you're working on?
Mine is oletha.org. Pretty easy. Although every year it changes. And so usually you'll see some activity after the session starts. So we are a legislature of 165 members, 125 in the House, 40 in the Senate. We're officially in session January, February, March, April is veto session. So bills are normally introduced January, bills are debated, hearings are held in February, and then they are debated on the Senate and House floor in March, and then that's it. So I wanted to also say this, Mary Dean, is the economic development funding that we talked about. You've got to get a proposal together. We've got to have something to be able, we can't just say we want the money. We've got to have something ready for the money to be used for. So I want to build up our communities. I mean, I drive in and out of Wichita. Some areas that need that economic development still look the same. So yeah, my website, oletha.org.
Well, I think she's referring to the Kansas Black Caucus. Do y'all have a website? Or any link or anything that they could go to in order to get any updates from about what you're doing?
That's interesting. I don't know if they do have a Facebook page. The Kansas Black Legislative Caucus doesn't, and I don't know if African American Affairs does. And I don't have a personal website. I've been asked to have one. I did have a Facebook page, but it's not very well monitored except during session.
I will say this, talking about a lobbyist, Mr. James Barfield, the young lady that was with us the other day at the city, to Donna Neal, and a young man, Bryant, the poet, Miss Mary Dean, what's his name?
I know you're talking about, I can't think of his name right now.
Yeah. So we are going to raise $500 and give it to those two young people to come up to the Capitol to just 2 days a week. And they can eat in the evenings with us, and they just need to stay overnight. They'll get a lobbyist badge, and they'll be able to send information back to you and others of what we're doing. We've got to have some help. Because like it was pointed out in the Senate, Senator Haley, in the Senate, what is there, 11 Democrats?
There are 11, yes, led by you and
so therefore, our load is even heavier because we have to make up. So we have to attend multiple meetings all day long. And so sometimes we don't have time unless I have an intern disseminate the information out there of what we're doing. And so then I try to catch up because we don't have a staff. So most of the things I do it on myself. And so, but I do plan to have some type of lobbyist, that's young people up there to help next session, to help get the information out there. And Senator David Haley, I'm losing my voice, but I've been talking all day. But perhaps we could make a motion to our Black Legislative Caucus to get a Facebook page to share what we're doing next session.
Let me ask you a question. When you talk about
like a good idea.
lobbyists, don't you have to be registered to be a lobbyist?
Mr. James Barfield, what I'm talking about, not a big time firm.
But any type of a lobbyist.
No, Mr. Barfield, anyone can go to the Secretary of State's office
Right.
and buy a badge. It's like, maybe it's went up now, $57, gets you a badge to walk around and talk to us. And you're taken more seriously when you have that badge on. So that's what I'm talking about. These two people would only lobby for the bills that we're all supporting, like a Tuesday, Wednesday, a Wednesday, a Thursday. And that's all they'll do. And they just need to get that. Look, they're not a big time lobbying firm, just lobbying for our issues. And the badge is $50-$60.
Does that badge
Yeah,
cover
and they're not-
registration?
Right.
Excuse me?
I mean, not a registration, but they do have them with, as Aletha said, with the Secretary of State's office. But that's something else to see the presence there. I don't think we have any Black lobbyists. Now we have, Ed Watson and then Sexton, Eric Sexton. I think they're the only two Black lobbyists. There have been a couple interns.
You
Do know
got
of any
Kerry
others?
Gooch. Kerry
And
Gooch.
Kerry, well, of course, Kerry has his own firm. Yeah, of course, Kerry Gooch. And yeah, that's it though. Out of, what would you say? They're probably 100, Aletha, maybe more.
Oh, it's more.
Yeah. Oh, actually, there I got the list in front of me here too. Yeah. So I mean, I don't know, but yes, there are very few Black lobbyists, and no young. Well, Kerry's young. Kerry
And
Gooch is young.
usually, like Mr. Barfield, for one topic, a big firm lobbyist might charge you $1,500, $2,000, or $3,000 for that 3 months to advocate for your one issue. So I've already talked to these two young people, and they're so excited and they want to help. One young man is with Progeny, and you met Tadana and Neil the other day, and they just want their gasoline to get up there. So I figure we give them, $300 each to come up there a couple of times a week, and just to lobby for our issues. Otherwise, yeah, we just need help.
Yes.
Before either one of you
Pardon me
go,
for interrupting. I'm sorry. I've got someone at the door, and I'm meeting them. I'm heading out. They're heading over to Missouri. I want to thank you again for allowing me to be a part of this, and I hope that we will do it again, and that you'll invite me back, and that we'll be able to follow up if we
that's
can.
what I was about to ask you, Senator, if we could make a promise that we could at least do this once a month.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can do it once a month,
Yeah,
but I don't know. But I can certainly commit to doing it more and to getting more people involved from our area as well. We have some advocacy groups here as well. I don't
Once a
know if I
quarter.
can commit to once a month, but definitely once a quarter.
Once a quarter, okay.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you
right.
all for coming. We really appreciate it.
Thank
and hope
you.
to see you again
Thank you.
soon.
Thank
Thank you both
thank
so much.
Oh,
All right.
appreciate
We'll be in
it.
touch. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Appreciate you.
Bye.
Bye.